Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. My name is Sean, and today we got to talk about the first sit-down interview with Vice President and now current Democratic nominee Kamala Harris, of course with the VP nominee Tim Walz at her side with CNN, because despite the fact that this appeared to be set up for her to knock it out of the park, despite the fact that she had 6 weeks in order to prepare for this since the coup where she stole the nomination for Joe Biden, despite the fact that she had nothing but positive media coverage leading up to this point, she was unprepared for the most basic questions. Now, I don't want to go too crazy about this. I don't want to say that this is going to end her campaign or anything of the sort. It's just one interview, but the fact of the matter is she didn't face the media for so long that she ended up magnifying the ridiculousness of every one of her things in this interview, because she should have done this weeks ago. Now, we're going to get into it, but before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money, okay?
The voters are really eager to hear what your plans are. If you are elected, what would you do on day one in the White House?
So right off the top, I'm just going to tell you guys out there in the audience, I'm not going to go over each and every one of the questions that Kamala answered throughout the course of this interview, but I thought the first question, the what are you going to do day one question that was just asked by, apparently it's Donna Bash, which by the way, Kamala mispronounced, and she did it on the A, and considering she's criticizing everybody who mispronounces her name on the A as an evil white racist, I find it to be incredibly hilarious.
In fact, Dana, excuse me.
But yeah, point being, her answer to this day one question was horrible. Horrendous.
Well, there are a number of things. I will tell you, first and foremost, one of my highest priorities is to do what we can to support and strengthen the middle class. When I look at the aspirations, the goals, the ambitions of the American people, I think that people are ready for a new way forward, in a way that generations of Americans have been fueled by hope and by optimism. I think, sadly, in the last decade, we have had in the former president someone who has really been pushing an agenda and an environment that is about diminishing the character and the strength of who we are as Americans, really dividing our nation, and I think people are ready to turn the page on that.
So what would you do day one?
Now look, I gotta be perfectly honest with everybody out there in the audience. The what will you do day one question is not the best question of all time to ask somebody who's running for president. However, it is a question that is always asked of everyone who is running for president. What will you do day one, which should be interpreted as what is your number one priority. So usually what candidates end up saying is that they'll sign an executive order to do this or that thing. An obvious one is the evil orange man who says day one, I'm going to close the border. He even says day one, I'm going to end the Ukraine war and all of that. Like, I don't understand how Kamala Harris, with 6 weeks to prepare for the most obvious opening question, can't give a straight answer. And honestly, Dana Bash is flummoxed by this too, because she repeats the question to her like, hey, idiot, can you just give me an answer? Can you say, day one, I will sign an executive order protecting reproductive rights or something of the sort? Now, of course, Joe Biden is in office, so it's not exactly the same thing because Biden could presumably sign that same executive order. So you have a little bit of an issue there. But you know what? None of that substance or anything matters right now. All you have to do is say, what is your number one priority? And say, I will sign an executive order in order to ensure that this number one priority is established on day one.
And I think people are ready to turn the page on that.
So what would you do day one?
Day one, it's going to be about, one, implementing my plan for what I call an opportunity economy. I've already laid out a number of proposals in that regard, which include what we're going to do to bring down the cost of everyday goods, what we're going to do to invest in America's small businesses, what we're going to do to invest in families, for example, extending the child tax credit to $6,000 for families for the first year of their child's life to help them buy a car seat, to help them buy baby clothes, a crib. There's the work that we're going to do that is about investing in the American family around affordable housing, a big issue in our country right now. So there are a number of things on day one.
Look, I have to be perfectly honest with you guys. I watched this thing live because I figured I would have to see it, but I did not expect right out of the gate for her to immediately stumble and fall on her face. She got the easiest question that is asked to each and every person that is running for office, and she bungled it twice. 2 times she managed to mess that up. Just think about how impressive that is. All you have to do is name a policy. In fact, if you don't want to name a policy, you could say, the first thing that I'm going to do day one is no matter who the Speaker of the House is, no matter who the Senate Majority Leader is, I'm going to call them and tell them that we're going to get to work helping the American people. That is a vague, meaningless answer, and it has about the same amount of substance as what Kamala delivered about child tax credits or whatever the hell she was talking about right there. But at least it's an actual action that you can do. Not day one, I'm going to talk about what I've been emphasizing with an opportunity economy and then child tax credits so you could get a car seat. Blah, 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 blah. Also, and I know this is not a substantive point, but we're talking about Kamala Harris, who has no substance behind her. But why are they seated this way in this particular interview? Tim Walz is on the outer side. Kamala, who by the way is wearing all gray, very muted throughout this whole interview, including in her wardrobe, is sitting behind this table. And when they do the cut for Dana Bash and then they cut back to them, it looks like she's asking the questions to Tim Walz. Like, this framing of this particular shot makes it look like he's the candidate and she's still the vice presidential ticket. I'm just pointing this out. I'm not saying anything other than the obvious, but this does not exude strength. It exudes awkwardness. I get they wanted to be in a diner for some odd reason, but it's very dimly lit. And again, she seems separated from the action by the fact that she is quite literally separated by a table from everyone else. This is not a great strategy in terms of the image you're trying to project, and considering the Kamala Harris campaign has so far been only good at one thing, which is putting out an image for the internet.com and for the media, aided and abetted by the media, this seems like a really basic fumble.
What about you?
Well, I'm excited about this agenda, too. As I said, the idea of inspiring America to what can be. And I think many of these things that the vice president's proposing are things that we share in values.
So she flips it to Tim Walz, who, again, should not be here. Now, the Democratic bots all over the internet.com will tell you that every presidential candidate does an interview with their VP candidate. But while that is, in fact, true, Kamala Harris hasn't done a single interview with anyone, and she brings this guy to her first one as a backup person to try to kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone and have him deflect criticism and distract from the fact that she's underperforming in, again, a friendly interview that is taped and put forward on a friendly network like CNN. That being said,
inspiring America to what can be.
When I heard Walz deliver this line, I thought for a second we were going to hear the unburdened by what has been line.
Inspiring America to what can be.
I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been. You know? What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened
By what has been.
what we can see, what we believe can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
Who we can be unburdened by who we have been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
Where we can be unburdened by where we have been and unburdened by where we are right now.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
That Kamala repeats constantly in all of her different speeches.
I want to get some clarity on where you stand on some key policy issues. Energy is a big one. When you were in Congress, you supported the Green New Deal. And in 2019, you said, quote, "There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking." Fracking, as you know, is a pretty big issue, particularly in your must-win state of Pennsylvania. Sure. Do you still want to ban fracking?
So this is another question that you should have definitely 100% been prepared for if you're Vice President Harris. During her presidential campaign, and I will play the tape for those of you who don't believe me, she said unequivocally, and I believe it was multiple times, that she would ban fracking.
There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. So, yeah, and starting with what we can do on day one around public lands, right?
And then there has to be legislation. But yes, and this is something I've taken on in California. I have a history of working on this issue. And to your point, we have to just acknowledge that the residual impact of fracking is enormous in terms of the impact on the health and safety of communities. Yeah, so thank you.
Now, of course, that is nonsense that is spat out in the Democratic primaries because Democratic primary voters hate energy, they hate natural gas, and even though it's significantly cleaner than coal, for whatever reason, they have been obsessed with the process of fracking, and therefore they want it banned. So point blank, when she was asked, she said yes, she would ban it. This was only a few years ago, again, when she was running for president. Now, since she has barely put out any policy positions, this has come up again.
No, and I made that clear on the debate stage in 2020, that I would not ban fracking. As vice president, I did not ban fracking. As president, I will not ban fracking.
But instead of acknowledging that she said that, she says, well, I made it clear in 2020 that I will not ban fracking. Then she says, as vice president, I did not ban fracking. Remember, she's going to use the fact that she's vice president and not president as an excuse on why she hasn't done anything on any particular policy. But now she had the power to ban fracking, according to her. And you need to just trust that, because remember 2020, even though that debate clip is in 2019, and maybe what she's referring to is the vice presidential debate versus Mike Pence, where reportedly she said she wouldn't ban fracking, she had changed her mind, but there's no explanation other than political expedience for this shift. Hey guys, editing Sean here. So I dug up the clip from the 2020 vice presidential debate because I figured might as well check to see if Kamala, the innocent angel, would lie directly to our faces. And it turns out she did. In 2020, she said this:
That Joe Biden will not ban fracking. That is a fact. That is a fact.
That's her saying Joe Biden won't ban fracking, but remember, she replaced Joe Biden via a coup.
2019, I believe, in a town hall, you said you were asked, would you commit to implementing a federal ban on fracking on your first day in office? And you said, there's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. So yes. So it changed in that campaign?
In 2020, I made very clear where I stand. We are in 2024, and I've not changed that position, nor will I going forward. I kept my word, and I will keep my word.
What made you change that position at the time?
So I actually got to give a little bit of credit to the interviewer right here. And again, this should have been a softball, a layup, because she re-asked the question, rereads her quote to her, and then Kamala says, oh, well, I made it clear that that wasn't my position, and I kept my word. You could trust me. I haven't changed my position on that, even though we just heard the quote. And again, that's her own word that she is going against by saying that she's now in favor of fracking.
What made you change that position at the time?
Well, let's be clear. My values have not changed. I believe it is very important that we take seriously what we must do to guard against what is a clear crisis in terms of the climate. And to do that, we can do what we have accomplished thus far. The Inflation Reduction Act, what we have done to invest, by my calculation, over probably $1 trillion over the next 10 years, investing in a clean energy economy. What we've already done, creating over 300,000 new clean energy jobs. That tells me, from my experience as vice president, we can do it without banning fracking.
So this is the my values haven't changed line that is clearly and obviously fed to her by her campaign team. And I actually think she completely misused it right here. I believe, and this is just speculation, that this specific line is what she was prepped to use as a response to a question about how she would ban private insurance in order to give people health care. And her response to that, because she has changed her position on that, she's no longer for Bernie Sanders style Medicare for all, would be, listen, my values haven't changed. I'm trying to get people the most amount of affordable healthcare possible. And back then, I believed that getting rid of private insurance was the way to go. But right now, I understand that I have to work with the private insurance system, work with what we have in order to achieve that end. I think that is where her values haven't changed. Prep was supposed to come in, not right here where it's a clear 180 on this specific issue.
Is there some policy or scientific data that you saw that you said, oh, okay, I get it now?
What I have seen is that we can grow and we can increase a thriving clean energy economy without banning fracking.
So this is actually one of the worst moments for CNN and for Bash throughout the whole course of this interview, because she's clearly and obviously trying to feed the candidate an answer. She's saying, hey, did you see some scientific literature that maybe convinced you that fracking wasn't as bad as you thought it was back in 2019? Maybe you saw some studies that show it actually reduces carbon and it's much cleaner than coal, and that's why you changed your mind? And Kamala won't take the handout from this person because she doesn't realize what's happening, because she's told to say, my values haven't changed even though my position changed 180 degrees. The only thing I'm left with as an observer is the truth here, which is she did a 180 because she needs Pennsylvania. Period. Point blank. It is that simple.
Okay. Another issue, big one, is immigration.
Now look, I'm going to skip over the immigration question. The reason why I'm going to do that is because Kamala's answer sucks. And unfortunately, there's no follow-up question. You can watch the full thing linked in the description of this video, but essentially she asked her why they didn't try to do anything about immigration for 3.5 years, and Harris answered by saying, well, we did try to do something after 3.5 years, but the evil orange man killed the bill, which should have led to a follow-up about before that. Remember when you were denying that this was even a crisis, but that follow-up never came. What I actually want to show you guys is the best answer from Harris, I believe, throughout the whole course of this interview.
President Biden has tried unsuccessfully to end the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. He's been doing it for months and months, along with you. Would you do anything differently? For example, would you withhold some U.S. weapons shipments to Israel? That's what a lot of people on the progressive left want you to do.
Let me be very clear. I am unequivocal and unwavering in my commitment to Israel's defense and its ability to defend itself. And that's not going to change. But let's take a step back. October 7, 1,200 people were massacred. Many young people who were simply attending a music festival. Women were horribly raped. As I said then, I say today, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. And we have got to get a deal done. We were in Doha. Mm-hmm. We have to get a deal done. This war must end. In the meantime, and we must get a deal that is about getting the hostages out. I've met with the families of the American hostages. Let's get the hostages out. Let's get the ceasefire done.
But no change in policy in terms of arms and so forth.
No, we have to get a deal done. Dana, we have to get a deal done. When you look at the significance of this to the families, to the people who are living in that region, a deal is not only the right thing to do to end this war, but will unlock so much of what must happen next. I remain committed, since I've been on October 8, to what we must do to work toward a two-state solution, where Israel is secure, and in equal measure, the Palestinians have security and self-determination and dignity.
Now, you guys might be thinking she didn't really say anything or take a strong stance on Israel versus Hamas, that war that's going on in the Middle East, but the fact of the matter is, this is kind of what she has to do. The Democrats need Muslims in Michigan to vote for them, but they also don't want to piss off high-value Jewish donors that are more supportive of Israel, so she has to thread the needle, not really give an answer to either side, so nobody can peg her down in terms of a position, so that way she doesn't have to deal with the fallout, because again, the Democrats need Michigan electorally, but Harris needs money to run her campaign, so she's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place right here, not to mention the fact that the pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas protesters, the anti-Israel protesters, whatever you want to call them, it's really not the point, are a thorn in the Democratic Party's side right now. Remember, they refuse to open up their party's platform, which is why it still talks about the re-election of Joe Biden, because they didn't want these people to try to have a resolution to get something anti-Israel in there, because they represent a significant portion of the Democratic base. She's hoping to paper over this issue going into Election Day and hopefully nab those Muslim voters, again, without angering the pro-Israel side.
You have never interacted with him, met him face to face. That's going to change soon. But what I want to ask you about is what he said last month. He suggested that you happened to turn black recently for political purposes, questioning a core part of your identity.
Yeah. And he's same old tired playbook. Next question, please.
That's it? That's it.
So I left this part in here because I actually find it to be incredibly fascinating in terms of what it tells us about the Harris strategy. Because if you'll recall, in 2020, she ran a very race-conscious primary campaign.
The environment is vital. Killmonger may have ruined and burned your field of heart-shaped herbs, but don't worry. I'm from California. I can repopulate that field with a bunch of different herbs. To the lovely people of Wakanda, I know you will make the right choice. And as always, Wakanda forever. Paid for by Kamala Harris.
She even called Joe Biden an evil white racist filled with evil white racism.
And I will say also that in this campaign, we've also heard, and I'm going to now direct this at Vice President Biden, I do not believe you are a racist. And I agree with you when you commit yourself to the importance of finding common ground. But I also believe, and it's personal, and it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me. So I will tell you that on this subject, it cannot be an intellectual debate among Democrats. We have to take it seriously. We have to act swiftly.
And she has been leaning into her black identity on various campaign stops. But I think right here, her advisors are telling her to go more in the Obama direction, where they don't emphasize race and they let her surrogates call everybody evil white racists on her behalf. And I also believe that they don't want her to come off as too combative because her campaign team believes that the American people are evil and sexist, and they don't think that they would like a woman who fights back, which is kind of amazingly sexist on their end. And I actually think them further flattening out her personality can only be detrimental to her as a candidate going forward. So that strategy of the Obama thing, maybe it actually does work because they need to appeal to some white working class voters. That's why they have Tim Walz. That's why they talk up his folksiness. But her not fighting back against Orange Man, I don't think is a good strategy, because if somebody's attacking you and you don't know how to attack back from a defensive position, you just look weak. And we saw this, by the way, in the Republican primary over and over and over again, where Trump would hit people hard and they would say, I'm going to rise above this. And then they would be out of the race the next week endorsing Trump.
I want to ask you a question about how you've described your service in the National Guard. You said that you carried weapons in war, but you have never deployed actually in a war zone. A campaign official said that you misspoke. Did you?
Well, first of all, I'm incredibly proud. I've done 24 years of wearing the uniform of this country. Equally proud of my service in a public school classroom, whether it's Congress or the governor. My record speaks for itself, but I think people are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and I speak especially passionately about our children being shot in schools and around guns. So I think people know me. They know who I am. They know where my heart is. And again, my record has been out there for over 40 years to speak for itself.
This is the question related to Walz's military service, and Bash actually follows up after that lukewarm answer, which is a dodge of it, although I did give Walz credit in the beginning for dodging this question in a kind of sly way, at least in the first one. However, upon follow-up, he ended up saying that he has bad grammar, so it was just a grammatical error.
And the idea that you said that you were in war. Yeah. Did you misspeak, as the campaign has said?
Yeah, I said we were talking about, in this case, this was after a school shooting, the ideas of carrying these weapons of war. And my wife, the English teacher, told me my grammar is not always correct. But again, if it's not this, it's an attack on my children for showing love for me, or it's an attack on my dog. I'm not going to do that. And the one thing I'll never do is I'll never demean another member's service in any way. I never have, and I never will.
No, it was a lie, a misstatement. Now, he could have said that the emotion took over, so he did misspeak. That's his campaign's official line. But for whatever reason, he has this awkward comment in there about grammar. And then he goes to what I think is a better defense, which is to attack from a defensive position, where he's like, oh, if they're not going to attack my military service, they'll start attacking my family or they'll start attacking my dog. And that is good. You're saying they'll attack you for anything, but you have to get around and navigate your own statements better before you get to that point, and saying it's a grammatical error is just dumb. He should say that he misspoke. Again, heightened situation, school shooting, he was emotional and all of that. That's a good excuse. It's the best one that you're going to find, even though we all know you were inflating your military service. And by the way, while I do give credit to Bash for that follow-up question, I do want to point out that there was another follow-up question that was left completely on the table, because it's not just the weapons of war thing that he used to imply that he went to do military service in a combat zone. He's also had other statements that you could have brought up, but more importantly, he actually retired from the military after knowing he was getting orders to deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan. I forget which one. And I think that would have been a good follow-up question to actually press him on. But this is what goes to show you that this is obviously still a very friendly interview, even though they can't handle basic rudimentary follow-up questions. And this is the difference between Democrats and Republicans. Democrats don't have to face a hostile media all that frequently. They can choose whether or not they're going to go on Fox News and be interviewed by conservatives. And that isolation, that I'm going to stay in my own bubble mentality, makes them weaker when it comes to actually responding to criticism or follow-up questions, because they're not expecting the media to press them even a little bit.
I just one other question, because again, this is all new. This was not, however many days ago, this was not on either of your bingo cards, especially yours. You had to clarify that you had said that you and your wife used IVF, but it turned out you used a different kind of fertility in order to have children. And then when you ran for Congress in 2006, your campaign repeatedly made false statements about a 1995 arrest for drunk and reckless driving. What do you say to voters who aren't sure whether they can take you at your word?
Now, look, I'm going to be perfectly honest. Whatever method of fertility treatment that Walz used in order to conceive a child, totally irrelevant. I don't think that harping on the difference between IVF and whatever he got, I already forgot it because it's so boring, I feel like I'm going to fall asleep, is going to produce any results for Republicans. But the thing that's often overlooked is that DUI arrest. Driving under the influence, very bad for political candidates. We have been taught in this country to absolutely hate drunk drivers. They're considered among the worst of the worst. I think drunk drivers, honestly, in a lot of regards, are considered worse than armed robbers to a great number of people in the American population. Now, to be clear, Walz was not baby drunk driving. He was caught going 96 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour zone while he had a blood alcohol level of 0.128. Now, a lot of people will say the legal limit today is 0.08, but let's be clear, in Nebraska at the time, the legal limit was actually 0.1. So he was over, but not as over as you would think, as indicated by that. Now, Walz eventually pled guilty to reckless driving in court in March of 1996, and while Walz said they dropped the DUI charges because it wasn't true, in reality, he admitted to drinking and driving as a part of that plea deal, and the court transcripts show this. So Walz lied about this, he was putting people in danger, and he was very drunk by today's standards, although not as much over the legal limit by the standards of the law back then, to be perfectly fair. Walz lied about the circumstances surrounding that. He has that on his record. This is something that I would press over and over again on Tim Walz. And honestly, this might be a time for the evil orange man to talk about how alcohol has had a huge negative impact on his own family. If you guys don't know, Donald Trump's older brother died in and around his 40s because he was an alcoholic and he basically destroyed his body through drinking. And this is why President Trump does not drink to this very day, which again, I'm not sure a lot of people know that. If I was on the Trump campaign team, I would be trying to figure out a way to contrast Walz's DUI with how Trump reacted when alcoholism impacted his family. Again, just an idea that the Trump campaign will never use. I'm basically howling in the wind or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, this is something that could be emphasized more due to the fact that the American people do not like drunk drivers.
Vice President Harris, you were a very staunch defender of President Biden's capacity to serve another 4 years. Right after the debate, you insisted that President Biden is extraordinarily strong. Given where we are now, Do you have any regrets about what you told the American people?
So here you have Bash asking Kamala about her statements related to Biden, about how strong and sharp and healthy he is. And of course, she's going to say she doesn't regret that. And again, this is something that you should be pressed on by the media, because this is very likely to come up during the presidential debate, which is how much did she know about Biden's mental deterioration? How much did she participate in the hiding of that deterioration? And did she aid and abet in covering that up? Because she knew if they actually had a legitimate primary, there was no way she could win outright, so she had to steal the nomination in this particular way. I think those are good lines of attack that she's not being prepared for by the media, and the reason the media is not doing a good job in doing that is because they're trying to cover up for her as well. But Trump's going to be on the debate stage with her, and he's going to be able to say all kinds of stuff that she's going to have to respond to. And although I expect the debate moderators to try to run defense from her, people are going to see that she won't be able to defend herself.
No, not at all. Not at all. I have served with President Biden for almost 4 years now, and I'll tell you, it's one of the greatest honors of my career, truly. He cares so deeply about the American people. He is so smart and loyal to the American people. And I have spent hours upon hours with him, be it in the Oval Office or the Situation Room. He has the intelligence, the commitment, and the judgment and disposition that I think the American people rightly deserve in their president.
Now, she ends up saying all these different various things, and I would just point out the obvious. If any of that were true, Joe Biden wouldn't have been forced off the ticket. If any of that were true, then he would still be the candidate.
When he called you and said he was pulling out of the race, what was that like? And did he offer to endorse you right away, or did you ask for it?
I just want to point out, throughout the whole course of this interview, the one legitimate smile that we got from Vice President Harris was right there. Right when Bash says, hey, remember when Joe Biden called you to tell you that the coup worked and you got the nomination? That's the only thing that she smiles about. But when she tries to think of a story, how to phrase the sequence of events, you can see a bunch of different indications of deception from her, including her looking up to the left and her starting with an irrelevant detail, which is, it was a Sunday. Again, we would all know the day or the date that this occurred. We don't need you to give us that little bit of irrelevant information that is very typical when somebody is lying. And by the way, I have added the behavioral panel to analyze this specific clip for deception, because I definitely want to get their view on this. So if you guys could do me a favor and make sure that they check this out, make sure that they review this, because obviously they're experts. I'm just speculating. But to me, even a layman knows that this story is nonsense.
It was a Sunday, so here, I'll give you a little too much information.
Go for it. There's no such thing, Madam Vice President.
My family was staying with us, and including my baby nieces, and we had just had pancakes and, Auntie, can I have more bacon? Yes, I'll make you more bacon. And then we were sitting down to do a puzzle.
I mean, honestly, who believes this? Who believes that this occurs? So she's like, I had my family over, including my baby nieces that you guys find to be so cute. And my niece said, Auntie President. I mean, she didn't know yet. Can I have more bacon? And I said, yes, you may. And I made it for her. Now, one of the reasons why I know this is fake is because there is polling that shows that independent voters like bacon, which is unsurprising because it's the United States of America. And everyone, except for San Francisco liberals, likes bacon. Just scientifically proven to be factual. Don't even bother to check the numbers on that. And by the way, Harris is aware of this. This is why she has mentioned bacon before in awkward, staged, ridiculous political settings, like this clip right here.
I just think that one of the best elements of a really good Thanksgiving dinner is really good gravy.
Cooking up cornbread, cranberries, collard greens.
Okay.
With an Iowa spice.
I do think of bacon as a spice.
So already, and I mean already, I am incredibly suspicious of this story, not to mention the fact that she looks to walls to decide whether or not her family was doing a puzzle, because they weren't doing a puzzle. This never happened.
Pancakes and, Auntie, can I have more bacon? Yes, I'll make you more bacon. And then we were sitting down to to do a puzzle. And the phone rang, and it was Joe Biden.
Harris was an active participant in the forcing out of Joseph R. Biden, and everybody should know this from this nonsensical answer that she delivers.
And the phone rang, and it was Joe Biden. And he told me what he had decided to do. And I asked him, "Are you sure?" And he said yes. And that's how I learned about it.
Total lie right there. She's like, oh, Joe Biden called me and then he told me what he was about to do. I do believe that this was a phone call that occurred, that he said, hey, look, I'm going to drop out of the race, because you would tell the person that you're going to elevate to your replacement candidate. But then if you notice, she looks down, breaks eye contact completely, and she's like, and that's when I heard about it. She says it really low and really quick. I believe, based on the fact that I am a fan of body language analysis and all the things that indicate deception, that she is clearly and obviously lying there. And by the way, she's clearly and obviously lying there. We have multiple reports that she was an active participant in the coup against Joe Biden, and the fact that she can't even deliver the lie well, to me, is a big indicator that those reports are in fact true.
And what about the endorsement? Did you ask for it?
He was very clear that he was going to support me.
So when he called to tell you, he said, I'm pulling out of the race and I'm going to support you.
Well, my first thought was not about me, to be honest with you. My first thought was about him, to be honest.
She just said, my first thought was not about me, to be honest with you. It was about him, to be honest. We all understand with these qualifications that this woman is lying. She is a liar. Every first thought that she's ever had is about her, how the world impacts her. This is a politician running for president. I'm sorry, but you don't run for president unless you believe you're the center of the universe, unless you have a giant ego. Everybody always talks about the evil orange man's ego, and the fact of the matter is, it's huge. Obviously, we understand. He put his name on buildings for years, always wanted to get his name in the paper, wanted to become a celebrity. We all understand that that man has an enormous ego, but the difference between the evil orange man and all these other politicians is not that his ego is any bigger than theirs. It's that they try to hide their ego. They try to pretend to be like you, and that's why they all come off as scummy liars.
I think history is going to show a number of things about Joe Biden's presidency. I think history is going to show that in so many ways it was transformative.
Not making eye contact, looking down the whole time, talking about what history is going to show and all of that. Clearly and obviously, she is uncomfortable delivering these lines related to the coup that they initiated against the president that got the most votes ever, that won the Democratic primary in 2024. I don't know how to make my case even more solid than this.
A moment that you shared, that the world shared with your son, Gus. You were speaking, the camera caught him, so incredibly proud of you, so emotional, saying, that's my dad.
Yeah, I don't know as a father I could have ever imagined that. I'm grateful for so many reasons to be on this ticket, but that moment, to understand what was really important, to have my son feel a sense of pride in me.
Now, they end up closing out this interview by asking Tim Walz about his kid getting really emotional and crying, and Harris about this photo that is clearly a propaganda photo of her niece with the braids, black hair, very big among the Wokies, looking up at her. And I'll say that Walz answered this question pretty nice. I mean, his kid, if you guys don't know, has a developmental disability. Unfortunately, a bunch of idiots were attacking his child. Stop attacking the children of these politicians. It makes you look horrendous when you do so.
Madam Vice President, the photograph that has gone viral. You were speaking, one of your grandnieces that you were just talking about was watching you accept the nomination. You didn't explicitly talk about gender or race in your speech, but it obviously means a lot to a lot of people, and that viral picture really says it. What does it mean to you?
But Harris, in response to this layup question, kind of completely messed this up.
You know, I am running because I believe that I am the best person to do this job at this moment, for all Americans, regardless of race and gender.
Right here, we have some of the Obama strategy, where it's not about race or anything like that. But notice how when she says she's running for all Americans, she's nodding her head no. And when she says it's not about race and gender, she is also nodding her head no, because her whole campaign is clearly and obviously about race and gender. Everybody can see that. And obviously, this is the kind of person, San Francisco elitist, who is not a fan of all Americans or even most Americans. This is an elitist through and through.
For all Americans, regardless of race and gender. But I did see that photograph, and I was deeply touched by it. And you're right, it's the back of her head, her two little braids, and then I'm in the front of the photograph, obviously speaking. And it's very humbling. It's very humbling in many ways.
So what I love about this is that she nods her head no on race and gender. She nods her head no on being for all American people. But then she knows the specifics of this photo, the braids and all that, almost like it was set up this way because obviously they're going to use that image for the campaign. But then she doesn't even stick the landing. She says, yeah, I'm humbled, I guess. I mean, is that what I'm supposed to say? Kamala, this is your family. These are the people that were asking you for more bacon, and you're like, oh, I'm such a good auntie. I'll give you more bacon, little girl, because I love you, because I'm a good auntie. And you can't even sink this shot. You can't even nail this layup. It's a slam dunk. Walz is holding you up. He just gave a pretty good answer about his kid and what it means to him from his actual human emotions, but you don't appear to feel any of those. So you're like, I'm supposed to say I'm humbled in this situation, Dana. I am, in fact, humbled by this. Pathetic. That is an easy question. It's a stupid question that tells us nothing, by the way, about this election cycle or policy, but of course, most of this was non-substantive. But yeah, you should do a little better right here. Like, how about this? I'm running to be the president of all Americans. I believe I'm the most qualified for the job, and it's not about race and gender for me. But I understand to a lot of little girls growing up in this country, when they see me, they don't only see a candidate, they see a symbol of something that they believe in at their core, and that photo represents that these children, not even realizing all the implications around me being the candidate, feel it in their bones, and I do want to represent that feeling for them, as well as that feeling for all Americans. Look at that. I don't even believe in any of this woke nonsense, but I can still deliver an answer better in that regard than the lady who's running an entire campaign fueled by the woke nonsense. I mean, come on, guys. What are you doing? And for those of you who say I am unfair and whatnot, and I'm biased and all that, I just dropped sage advice for the vice president on how to answer that question, because she fumbled and bumbled it, and it was embarrassing in every possible way. But I want to know what you guys think about this whole interview. I want to know if you thought I was too nitpicky, or she was really good, or if you buy into the fact that it's not really going to kill her campaign, but she bungled it. Leave those thoughts down in the comments below, and as I said, if you like this video, then show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the first interview with the current Democratic nominee, where she needed her backup security blanket Walz. Till next time.